Hey, my name is Fee, and I'm a longtime 3D artist looking to get back into drawing and painting by practicing more of my 2D skills. Currently, I've been working through the How to Draw and How to Render book by Scott Robertson. You're watching a time lapse of my practice, which ran a total of about 1 hour, broken up into two 30-minute parts. The sketch and shadow construction in part 1 and the digital painting and rendering in part 2. Also note this footage is sped up 10x, but if you're interested in the real-time videos of this practice, check out the cards in the corner. So there were many takeaways from this practice that I wanted to share. Starting with the sketch, it looks like I still have some work to do with learning the correct shadow constructions of overhangs and floating objects in a local light scenario. I had trouble on this topic previously in another video as well, so tackling multiple, more complex objects also proved to be difficult. But challenging yourself outside your comfort zone is a great way to make mistakes and learn from them. One thing I noticed while rewatching this is that I should have probably used less construction lines and only commit to the lines that matter. For example, the lines closer to the intersection points of the light rays and shadow lines are really the only ones we care about. By drawing all of those construction lines, that definitely cluttered up the sketch and just made it more confusing later on, as you can probably tell. I had to switch to a blue color towards the end so that I could differentiate which lines were what. Alternatively, I think I could have used more layers to hide some of the construction lines as I went on. That way I could have kept the guidelines but hide certain sections when I felt good about that construction. But in the end, I still believe this sketch turned out okay. You might have noticed a small correction I made towards the end of the sketch phase where the overhang shadow that casted onto the smaller floating object was slightly closer than the initial blue line that I had marked. Lastly, the shadow shape looked kind of funky, and this is because of the light position I chose. If the light was closer to the objects and also higher up, I think the shadow would have made a little more sense, and that floating object shadow would have been underneath of the object. Okay, onto the rendering. Learning from my previous rendering practice, assigning those number values definitely helped me focus a little more on the technical part of rendering rather than worrying about the theory part. With that said though, getting used to controlling the brush takes a lot of practice, and a lot of my experience has been with sketching, so that comes more natural to me. Even though I've done a lot of 3D painting, when it comes to traditional renderings like this, I still feel very much like a beginner. It's awkward and very different than painting on 3D models in my opinion. I'm also beginning to think having such a precise sketch as an underlayer is working against me. I've noticed I'm trying really hard to stay within the lines, and in some ways that is making the painting feel very static and stiff. I know I want it to be loose and make the painting feel more expressive, but maybe that's asking for a lot with this subject matter being just simple block volumes. Subconsciously in the back of my mind though, I had a feeling I didn't quite make that shadow construction right in the sketch phase. So when I got to the painting part, I already had this preconception that the painting was going to be wrong. I think this added to the overall feeling I had while I was painting. As artists, we tend to make judgments on our work while we're doing the work. This is part of the cycle of making mistakes, analyzing, critiquing, and then making adjustments and corrections. And although I think this is a good thing, it does add to the difficulty of learning and practicing without judgment. Overall, I'm happy with how the sketch turned out. The rendering took a little step back on the execution, but nothing that couldn't be corrected with more practice. If anything, this exercise just reinforces to me that I need to go back to more simple objects and also restudy the construction of shadows and overhangs. I understand that doing these simple volumes isn't as interesting as painting some epic portfolio piece, but my hope is that these practices will ultimately lead me there. In any case, I mostly publish real-time videos of my practice sessions here on the channel, but I've also been enjoying doing these artist commentaries a lot to help give insight into my thought process. I hope some of my learnings with this example will help others who are on the same journey. If this is something you'd like to see more of, or if there are other videos you'd like me to analyze, just let me know. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I'll catch you on the flip.